Okay, welcome everyone to the April 2022 forecast. I always choose images, I think, that reflect what's going on, whether it's out there or in here. And there's certainly a lot going on in April. Certainly a lot of good things as well, even if we want to stay away from good and bad. And I think this image of the ocean, the water, and the sunrise, or, which is interesting in this image, is it a sunrise or is it sunset? Maybe it's more of a sunset. And this sort of dichotomy that is within the sign Pisces. And if we think about Pisces and the oceans and that everything is contained in the cosmic soup, but also the image of the two fish swimming in opposite directions, that this is true and that's true. How can this be true and that be true? Well, they can within Pisces, the realms of Pisces, the more spiritual sign. But at the same time, on another level, it's very confusing that this is true and also this is true. And it creates a lot of confusion. It creates a lot of sort of, in more practical terms, propaganda. That's one thing, of course, we can see in the world. And these are things that happen during war times. But in our own lives, how do we approach this and this confusion that is possible? Because Mercury currently is in Pisces. Jupiter is about to move in, followed by Neptune, all in the month of April. And so the sun is there at the moment. And basically all of this emphasis now shifting into Pisces, into this cosmic soup, into all of these kind of contradictory things going on, and all of these possibilities at the same time. The pure potentiality of the sign Pisces really highlights that we need to be on guard for how are we channeling this. Because if it could go any way, and if anything could be true and everything is pure potential, then we really need to be mindful of how we're expressing these energies with these transits now. Because with Neptune, especially in Jupiter moving in, that can be absolute and utter confusion and delusion and tripping out and not wanting to deal with any reality, like going on a mad bender and getting high. Or it could be completely a sense of deep connection with humanity and humanity's struggles and absolute, connection to whether an individual or humanity. This is why Venus is exalted in Pisces, by the way. And Venus is moving into Pisces by the end of April as well. Pisces and Venus go hand in hand because it's about a love for humanity, a sense of connection to everyone. But we can't physically, practically do that. We can't connect with everyone, which is why Pisces, and anyone who has Pisces prominent knows this very well. If you're trying to give all your energy to everybody and take on board everyone and everything, you end up with compassion burnout, and you can't keep doing it. So obviously you have to actually direct and choose where you're going to direct your attention and energy individually in your life practically. But you can still have a deeper connection to humanity. This is the big theme of April. There's a lot going on that, if you're open to it and you're able to connect with it, there's a great deal of humanity. There's a great deal of surrender, and there is a great deal of loss as well. But there's also a letting go and moving on and ending and new beginnings, and in more positive ways, new beginnings. So because there are more positive transits coming up in April, believe it or not. Now, you might not believe this right now as I'm recording this on the 27th of March. It might feel like, where the hell are those? But they are, and we haven't had them in a while. And that especially is Jupiter moving into Pisces by mid-month. And so I'll talk about those: Jupiter, Neptune moving into Pisces, Venus later on, Mercury already in, the sun in there and moving out into Aries. And we can see the sun on the horizon. We can see the light, the energy return, and a sense of more confidence building now as well by mid-April. But we still have some things to get over. There's some really challenging transits going on at this time as well, which I'm going to highlight, including the Saturn-Mars conjunction and all of the planets on one side of the lunar nodes. So let's go through it one by one. But before we do, I just want a quick chant for Ganesh to help us clear our way, to clear all the blocks, mentally, emotionally, physically even, to help us in our path. So this mantra here is a nice, easy one for Ganesh. And so I'll just say it 3 times. Om Gang Ganapataye Namah. Om Gang Ganapataye Namah. Om Gang Ganapataye Namah. So before we get into the details, I just want to, because I'm really focusing on the YouTube channel at the moment and trying to get more subscribers. It's not something I've been doing a lot of. And so I always forget to tell people to do this simple thing. It's a simple thing, but it helps me out because it means that more people see the video. So if you like the video, please leave a comment. That'd be great. If you can hit the like button and subscribe. For those who are here with me live, of course, you are all patrons. For anyone who isn't, then consider joining up as a patron. You get the sign-based forecasts every month. So I go through the signs, how each sign experiences these transits every month, as well as daily content on Patreon. You can just go to timelineiastrology.com and join the community. So I just want to highlight one other thing on the website. Now, this is something that if you have it already, great. If you don't, you might consider getting it, because when I talk about any of these transits or any forecasts, it's really helpful to have your timeline. So on the homepage on Timeline Astrology, if you go here, you just fill in your details and you get a free report. And basically it shows your life in terms of these timelines, I call them, or planetary cycles. And it really tracks the whole arc of your life, as I put it here, by month and year. So this is actually really important in terms of what we're going to talk about next, because wherever you're at, this saying, one person's utopia is another's dystopia. Wherever you're at, i.e. the dashas in Indian astrology, the circumstances you're in is going to have more of a say on these transits than anything, as well as your birth chart itself, of course, and where you are physically. All of those are going to have an impact on the transits. The transits are really just the trigger to all of these things. And I just want to remind you as well, if you're watching this, I use sidereal calculations. So that's another thing to be mindful of. So getting into the transits then for April, this is a major transit. This is where all of the planets now have lined up in just 3 signs as I speak. So for the end of March into the beginning of April and into the new moon on April 1st, for the next few days, we have this Kal Sarpa Yoga and Shula Yoga. Kal Sarpa is the serpent of time. When all of the planets are on one side of the nose, it creates a lot of intensity, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of volatility. So that is still in effect, and it won't be broken until the end of April. There is also at this time, for the next few days until the new moon on April 1st, this Shula Yoga, which is, the Shula is like the trident of Shiva. So it's sharp. Another word for Shula is sharp. So it's very, very sharp and destructive. And so it's when all the planets line up in just 3 signs. It's not an easy one. Adding to Kal Sarpa Yoga, it's just a very volatile period by the end of March into the beginning of April. And there are other reasons that beginning of April is also very volatile we have to be mindful of. So we need to kind of get over this beginning period of April to get to the middle part where some better transits are coming in. But April is such a transition and so volatile that it might feel like, well, where's the good stuff? As everyone's been talking about in astrology, these better transits coming up in April. It's just that it's so transitional that we have to maybe wait until May, for things to settle down a bit. So like I said, Mercury will end this Kal Sarpa Yoga by April 24th, and it itself is whizzing through 3 signs the whole month, in just 1 month. It's in Pisces to begin with, then it goes into Aries on April 8th, and then it goes into Taurus by April 24th. So it's in 3 different signs, and then it's going to stay in Taurus for a long time, in end of April, May, June into July, because it's going to go retrograde from May. So that's something to be mindful of. But for now, it's in Pisces, where it's confused, where the mind is a bit boggled with what's going on, where we might be feeling overwhelmed mentally, emotionally. Mercury is the intellect, and it's in Pisces, the big soup, the big grand picture, and it gets really confused and overwhelmed by all of it. It then goes into Aries, like I said, by April 8th and until the 24th, where it's a bit more active and proactive and sharp. And then in Taurus, where it's in a much better position, in a friendlier place by the end of April. And then it's breaking this Kal Sarpa Yoga. So there's more positive transits by end of April for sure. Before then, we have to deal with this Mars-Saturn conjunction exact on April 5th. This is something to be mindful of, where Mars is exalted by degree and Saturn in its own sign. And so this is not an easy one at all. Now, if you have something you're working on, you can focus on and you can complete, great. That's the best use of this. It's like an ending. It's like focus, deliberate, and disciplined. If you don't, it's like that saying, the devil makes work for idle hands. This is not the best transit. If you've got nothing to do and you're sitting on this, like trying to sit on your hands, it's just going to build and build into a really frustrating mess. So make sure that you have some way of expressing this and that you don't get frustrated, that you have something you can focus your energy on and finish and be really focused on it. If it's more detailed work, great. So it is a time to finish work. Now, the last time Mars and Saturn were together was 2 years ago in March 2020. We know what happened then. This was the beginning of lockdowns, the beginning of the pandemic, first major wave. And now we're having another wave. And it's the end of the story in many ways as well, but it's also another wave. And I mentioned this before, that Saturn's aspect into Libra and now Ketu, the South Node moving into Libra, might show like containment of the virus in terms of it actually might prop up or crop up in different areas of the world, but it might be contained within those areas. And that seems to be what's happening. So as bad as this is, it's also moving forward because these are very strong, Mars and Saturn right now. So they're even stronger than they were 2 years ago as well. But they are called this Yama Yoga. So Yama is the Lord of Death, literally. But another translation of Yama, though, is discipline or restraint. And people who practice yoga are familiar with yamas and niyamas, the moral disciplines and the, so it's about being disciplined, obviously. So this combination, again, if you're disciplined, great. If you're not, and your energy's all over the place and you're scattering your focus, it's going to be quite frustrating. So that's something to be mindful of, because then after they conjunct, Mars is going to go into Aquarius. Remember, these are the sidereal signs now. So Mars on the 7th is going to go into Aquarius. And therefore, pretty soon after, Rahu moves into Aries and exchanges with Mars. So this is a very complex, intricate energy that could be really felt in terms of a lot of volatility, a lot of ups and downs. And when energy, i.e. Mars, is constrained initially by Saturn, this whole period, so our energy is constrained, and then it's kind of let loose and let rampant and all over the place, it can be like spikes of energy and then dropping and spiking and dropping. So we need to be very mindful of a lot of volatility moving into April as well. And for some time, because Mars in Aquarius for April and May, moving into May, is exchanging with Rahu in Aries, in Mars's sign. So it's just a very volatile mix of energies for the next few weeks. And in a way, the volatility is going to create some breakthroughs, but there's going to be a lot of breakdowns as well, leading to the breakthroughs. And those breakdowns can come in all kinds of shapes and sizes around the world and in your life. So just be mindful of the energy. So this Rahu, Ketu, and I'm using me notes here when I say these dates, moving into Aries, Libra, sidereal Aries, Libra, April 12th until October 30th next year. So a year and a half of Mars been really activated in a strong way with Rahu. And the fact that Mars is moving into Aquarius, Rahu's sign, and exchanging with it as this is occurring, the beginning of it is even more volatile to begin with. But it's volatile because Aries is very sort of gung-ho and active and proactive and impulsive even. And Rahu further exaggerates and distorts that tendency. So it's like, be mindful of being very reactive as opposed to proactive. And be mindful of overdoing that impulse to be active and creating too many impulsive actions that create problems. That's what I would say about this particular transit with Rahu. It is moving from Taurus though. So I'm saying here, it literally is unmasking Taurus. So that's something to maybe be thankful for, but it's moving into Aries, which is a more warlike. I mean, we've already seen that already, right? But it's going to create even more volatility, unfortunately. Now, at the same time, Ketu is moving into Scorpio. And or sorry, is moving out of Scorpio and releasing that intensity in a way and focusing all of that intensity on Libra. And the best part of Ketu, I guess, always is the kind of attention and focus in a more positive way and deepening our experience of that thing, as opposed to, you know, the superficial never, ever goes well with Ketu. So wherever Libra is in your chart, for example, if you're not going deeply into that part of your life, into that relationship, into that thing that you're doing, whatever it is, and experiencing it on a whole deeper level, it might just completely feel off and very dissatisfying. And you might, you know, not only neglect it, but you might actually even reject it. So be very mindful of rejecting something that you haven't investigated fully, and that maybe there are other ways of experiencing it on a whole deeper level that you haven't even accessed yet. So this tendency for the nodes to Rahu increase and Ketu decrease means that Mars themes are increased for the next year and a half, i.e. war, fighting, individualism, freedom of movement, and volatility, versus Venus decreased, which is social life. Who knows what that means? The economy, relations, diplomacy. This could play out in oh so many ways, but the thing with this kind of theme of increase and decrease personally can be channeled in more positive ways, for sure. For example, you could be more active in seeking something that you want while connecting deeply with others who you can inspire through your want. That's Rahu in Aries, Ketu in Libra. So wherever these signs are in your chart, Aries, Libra, this is always the case. This sense of I want this, Aries, and this is the compromise, Libra. So if you can make sure that you're going for what you want and inspiring others by doing so, it's a better expression of this than going for something you want and saying, screw you, pardon my French, screw you to everyone else. That's kind of a very reactionary Aries when you do that. And why would you do that anyway? Right? And checking with yourself, because let's face it, Rahu, Ketu are shadows, so it brings out the shadow impulse. So if you're feeling triggered by someone and you reject someone or something offhand, just check with that. Why am I doing that so quickly? What is it in that person or that situation or that thing that I need to reject? So anyway, that is Rahu and Ketu in Aries and Libra, moving in on the 12th and for the following year and a half. So it's a big change, and it's just one of many big changes in April. The other big change that's happening is that Jupiter and Neptune are moving signs. Now, Jupiter moves signs every year, but Neptune moves signs every 14, 15 years. So this is like huge. So Jupiter and Neptune move into Pisces mid-month, Jupiter on the 13th and Neptune on the 18th. Before then, they conjunct in the very last degree, April 12th, the very last degree of Aquarius. Now, whether you call it Aquarius, sidereal Aquarius, or you look at the tropical zodiac Pisces, they're coming together, right? And the last time they came together in this exact place of the zodiac was during the end of the Crimean War. Now, that's not a coincidence. That's a pattern. So this is hope on the horizon, because although, you know, of course, the Crimean War actually meant that, and they had a war back in 1854, 55, 1856, when they came together, literally 2 weeks after the exact conjunction of Jupiter and Neptune, there was a treaty signed and it ended the Crimean War. Now, if that's not hope, I don't know what is. So it's likely that there will be some sort of treaty or some negotiation or some peace treaty or ceasefire by the end of April, in my estimations. Now, however, and by the way, another event I put in here was the Chapati movement. I wrote an article about this already, so you might have read about it. But basically, this is bizarre, but this is the other side of Jupiter and Neptune, where in India at the same time as the Crimean War, there was this uprising in India, but it kind of was this kind of really secretive, almost like mailing system where people all over India were sending these chapatis, and the British government didn't know what was going on and thought that there were some secret messages hidden in these chapatis, these breads. So they had no clue what was going on, and they got very paranoid. And this is one of the other sides of Jupiter-Neptune. There's a lot of paranoia, propaganda, false flags, misinformation, a lot of things that we just cannot figure out. And the other side of it is that we might be deluding ourselves and tripping out and going on some wild escapism. I know actually that Berlin are holding the Love Parade this year for the first time since 2010, which is interesting if they do go ahead with that, because the reason they stopped them in 2010, I think, was because of several deaths at it. And the fact that they would choose to actually have this event again in 2022, when Jupiter and Neptune come together in Pisces, it's like summer of love all over again. The thing is, there's so many other things going on at the same time that it's almost like you could call 2022 the summer of love and hate in a way. And this, again, this kind of dichotomy, this two sides of Pisces always, that love is, love could be love and love could be hate, from a tantric point of view, that doesn't actually make sense in any logical way. Pisces never makes sense in any logical way. But in another more spiritual way, hate is love in the form of hate, if you want to look at it like that. So yeah, that's what I'm going to call this summer, the summer of love and hate. So then the other thing, if that weren't enough, in 1 month, we have the other big mover moving, that is Saturn, by the end of April as well. So it's like, there's so many changes going on in April. So on April 28th, it's moving into Aquarius, remaining within the lunar mansion Dhanishta. And I find it really interesting that this is re-instigating the sort of, and tightening up the bonds within Europe and the allied forces and all of that, and NATO and the EU. And this is what Saturn in Dhanishta is all about. And the last time Saturn was in Dhanishta, by the way, was the formation of the EU. That's when it was literally formed 30 years ago. So now it's back again, and it's all about reforming it, or re-strengthening allied forces and all of that. So we're going to see more of that as well at the same time. But of course, on the other side of that, you're going to see Russia and China forming, well, you already have seen Russia and China and other countries forming an alliance on the other side of it. So there's this different alliances are going to be formed in this next year for sure. But now that Saturn is moving into Aquarius, that is like, it's almost like if you ever wear like really tight clothes, or tight shoes, and like you take them off, and it's like that with Saturn moving out of Capricorn in many ways, whatever Capricorn represents for you personally, of course, but generally Capricorn is where we see Pluto right now. And Saturn and Pluto is like this really restrictive kind of doom and gloom sort of transit. And now that it's moving out into Aquarius, this is definitely going to ease up that kind of tension. It's like maybe undoing a couple of buckles on your belt kind of thing. The other thing, like I said, is about like coming together with groups, and maybe in your own life, noticing where you can come together and form alliances, and for, people, you to help people, but also others to help you to come together in a group and help each other. This is a big theme of Dhanishta, as well as the theme of, again, further dismantling of systems, which is ongoing, of course, but building new ones now, which is where this next part of the story comes in with Saturn moving into Aquarius. So let's get into the moon phases then. So we have 2 new moons in April. Beginning the month on April 1st, we have a new moon that's very important. It's the Lunar New Year. Then we have a full moon on the 16th, and we have another new moon and a partial solar eclipse. We're heading into eclipse season now already in April, on April 30th. So even more change in a month that already had so much change going on. So this is the new moon on April 1st. It's an important one because it's the Lunar New Year. So this is the chart. The moon and the sun at 17 degrees of sidereal Pisces, Mercury not too far off it, at its exact degree of debilitation, where it's weakest, where it's a bit lost in the kind of, overwhelmed in all of what's happening emotionally, every which way. The mind is frazzled. You'll notice again, all of the planets, visible planets, are in just 3 signs: Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces. Uranus is not visible, so it's not counted in this. So all of the planets are in 3 signs. This is this Shula yoga, this very sharp, fierce combination or yoga. And so the whole year to come has this sharpness about it, has this intensity about it because of the Kal Sarpa as well, all of the planets on one side of the nodes. So it's going to be an intense year. There's no doubt about that. I think, nobody is surprised by that. But when we add the fact that Mars and Saturn are conjunct, very closely conjunct within a couple of degrees here, it's like, just over a degree, then we're looking at really an intensity, yes, but also if you can channel this intensity for this next year, you can create an awful lot. You can be very productive. If you're very disciplined and focused about what you're doing. And again, especially in relation to the sign Capricorn and what that is for you, you can make so much happen. And in a way, it'd be almost like a shame to put all this energy to waste, this energy and focus and drive. Mars is exalted. Saturn is in its own sign, so powerful. So that's one thing. The other thing is that you can see there's almost the, again, exact conjunction here, a couple of degrees apart, but it's quite close, Jupiter and Neptune. So we have this intense year coming up. We have a lot of volatility, a lot of strength, though, to focus and channel and make something happen. But we have a lot of dreams and aspirations that might never land, because Jupiter and Neptune can be quite fantastical. So we need to be mindful of that. We need to be mindful of making our dreams a reality and focusing all our will, power, and energy and focus on something we can make happen. Now, this chart is for Ireland, where I am. So it's not going to be the same for all places in the world. I have Ireland here with Pisces rising. So depending on where it is for you, it'll play out differently for each country. So that's something I can't go into here, but that's the general theme. The new moon itself is in the sign Revati, which is the last lunar mansion of the zodiac, the very end of sidereal Pisces. So this is what I call the faithful one. So it's about having faith, of course. Any new year is. That things will get better and that there's hope. And there is hope, because this particular year, when we call it, this year the Shubha Krita year, it's the 36th Jovian year. When we look at the cycles of Jupiter and Saturn and how they run, we have this 36th year Shubha, which means auspicious, literally. So you might say, well, that sounds great. And it is. However, the last time we had one was in 1962 to 63, and that was the Cuban Missile Crisis, by the way. But again, remember, it is more hopeful, it's more auspicious. The Cuban Missile Crisis didn't amount to anything. It was diffused, right? So we can hold on to that. So it is more auspicious in general. It is the first of a new cycle, because last year we began we had the last of a cycle of 5. Actually, this is the first of a cycle of 5. Sorry, this is a mistake. First of a new cycle of 5. They're counted in cycles of 5. If you take Jupiter's transit around the zodiac, it takes 12 years, and 5 of those is 60 years. And every 60 years, Jupiter and Saturn come into a similar relationship. So in the early 60s, of course, we had the conjunction of Jupiter, Saturn in Capricorn, as we did recently. So anyway, that's a whole other aside. That's the new moon and new lunar year on the 1st of April. It's an important new start for us all, with many breakthroughs in a year that has many breakdowns as well, of systems and all of that. Don't need to go on and on about that. So then the next lunation, the major lunation, is the full moon in the middle of the month on the 16th of April. This is in Libra. Ketu has now moved into Libra, remember. The sun is opposite here in Aries, with Mercury in Aries and Uranus and Rahu coming together now as well. So there is obviously, an intensity building in Aries. And as Saturn moves into Aquarius after this, by the end of the month, we have Saturn's focus on Aries as well. We have Rahu and Uranus in Aries. We have the sun in Aries. It's a lot of Aries focus and less focus on Libra. So again, that's kind of like, and especially for this full moon on the 16th of April, it's important to, again, check in with what this part of your life is in Libra. What house position is this? Where or what or who is being affected by this, and how do you channel this in more positive ways to really deepen your connection to that thing or that person? And if you don't, it could be that some part of you is actually even rejecting, if not or at least neglecting, or if not rejecting that thing or that person. And you might not necessarily be doing it consciously either, because Rahu Ketu are the shadows. So there can be maybe even a sense of maybe sabotaging that thing. And check in with that. Like, maybe there's a reason for that. Maybe actually it's time to move on from that thing, you know, and even if it's just a way of thinking, maybe it's time to move on from the way you've been thinking about that thing and to change your relationship with that thing or that person so that you can start again. That's Aries. So that is the full moon on the 16th. It's in this lunar mansion called Chitra, the bright or the brilliant one, I call it. A symbol is a jewel or a pearl. So it's very much about shining bright. And like the saying goes, all that glitters isn't gold is important in terms of this lunar mansion, but especially now with Ketu moving into Libra. All that glitters is not gold. So what happens when the gold is taken away? Quite literally, if the money's taken away, if the economy is challenged, if basic pleasures and all of that in life are challenged, relations are strained, diplomacy is strained, what happens in those instances? We have to deepen our connection with each other. There's no other way around it. And of course, that means we have to be clear about who we are as we deepen our connection with others. Finally, then sorry, skipped one there. The end of the month then sees another new moon, this time an eclipse, because of course the sun has moved into Aries where Rahu has just moved in as well. So it's a very partial solar eclipse, but it is an eclipse. It's at 16 degrees of Aries. So this is something to be mindful of if you were born at the end of April or beginning of May, or if you were born at the end of October, beginning of November. If your birthday's then, your sun is here or opposite in Libra. So that's something to be mindful of. Or if you have any planets around 16 degrees Aries or Libra, this is a time to really hone in now on this balance or potential imbalance between these two signs and these two areas of your life. And again, your need to do something for yourself and your need for freedom or whatever it is in Aries versus your need to connect with others or any kind of other. It doesn't have to be a person, it's anything else. So you have your thing that you want to do now, and this eclipse is really highlighting that, and this kind of, I need to make this happen now, and it's like a fresh start, this new moon and eclipse. But you need to be open to the potential of you going so gung-ho into something that you neglect something else. And so what is that something else? Again, that's based on the signs and the house positions of these in your particular chart. But in a general way, again, we can say that there's definitely a tipping the balance into the self, into freedoms, into movement, the push and drive for the individual, as well as, you know, whatever, you know, even countries moving forward with plans regardless of any other country. That kind of thing could start happening more so from April. So I just want to point out as well that Saturn at this point has moved in, remember, from the 28th, just before this new moon, and it now aspects Aries. So despite all of our gung-ho energy and volatility of getting something started and making something happen, we need to be mindful of, you know, focusing always with Saturn when it aspects Aries. And so focusing on what we're doing and making sure that we're doing it right and we're not being impulsive and reckless even. And if we can do that, great. The other thing about this eclipse and new moon is see here is that Jupiter and Venus are at the same degree, quite closely conjunct Neptune. So while all this is going on, there is definitely the potential by the end of April into the beginning of May of absolute, complete and utter abandonment of hedonism and checking out of what is happening just to do what we want to do, regardless of what anyone says. And we're just going to do what we're going to do, and that's it. So that's something to be really mindful of, these transits where it could really get out of hand for some people. So that is the eclipse. I'll just show you the actual eclipse. You want to get a visual of it. It's not seen very much on the planet, but doesn't mean that it's not impacting the whole planet in many ways as well, and that particular part of the chart. So you can see here, it's just South America, the very tip. And again, it's a very partial solar eclipse. So not many will see this, but again, it's more energetically what's going on. 16 degrees of Aries in this sign Barony. Now I want to, just to finish, highlight this point of Barony and the lunar mansion here in Aries. Barony is she who bears, to bear down, to bear witness even. This sign and the eclipse and the upcoming transit of Rahu, the North Node in Barony in the coming months, highlights a theme here that's going to be very relevant in terms of Barony, which is judgment. People being judged. And Rahu moving in here suggests that there's going to be a lot of distortions and exaggerations and a lot of shadowy kind of stuff going on, where people, you know, are being judged on what they're doing, but we're not really clear about what's happening, or things are distorted. Truths, facts are distorted, where somebody maybe is, you know, how would I put it? We need to be mindful of who we're accusing of what, and whoever gets accused of what, that they actually get their just, there's justice, basically. Because Barony is ruled by Yama, as I mentioned before, the god of death, but he's also seen as the god who we all have to face after death. When we meet Yama, he tells us where we go. Do we go to heaven or hell? So he judges us, you know, so it's like Judgment Day. So Rahu moving in here suggests that there's going to be a lot of exaggerations, a lot of distortions on who is being judged and for what. I don't know how exactly that's going to play out, but it's certainly going to be a theme moving forward into the next few months with the Rahu moving in here. And it's going to be a strong one as well, because according to myth, Rahu was born in the lunar mansion Barony when it was active. So anyway, that's a whole other aside. Just to finish up, for those who are watching the playback, thank you for watching. If you like the video, please leave a comment, hit the like button and subscribe, and think about becoming a patron. So I'm going to do, as I do every month, I'm going to make these exclusive to patrons from now on, sign by sign, going through each sign and how all of these transits impact each sign each month. So for those who are here live, of course, you are already a patron. And again, I appreciate your support. And I look forward to sharing the sign-based forecast with you very soon. And for anyone who's here, you can ask me questions now. I'm going to stop recording, and until next time.